Hi everyone, and welcome to our International Women's Day series. I'm joined today by Ros Singleton, who is CEO at Spring Fibre, Chair of the UK5G Advisory Board and an angel investor. She's going to help us shine a light on one of the 6 missions of International Women's Day, which is Women in Tech. Thank you for joining us, Ros.
Thanks, Roberta. It's great to be here.
That's just a little bit more about yourself and about your background.
I'm sure. So I've been in telecoms now for around 30 years. I pretty much joined what is now O2 when I left school, and I started out basically doing admin, faxing number changes to Ofcom back in the days when A used to use faxes and B, none of that was automatic because only about 1,000 people had mobile phones. And I've been through all sorts of parts of the industry, wired and wireless, and in various countries ever since. I've worked at most of the major suspects. In the last couple of years, I found myself the chair of UK5G, which is great because actually we're all about developing the ecosystem around 5G. So it's not about promoting the technology or the consumer side of it, but much more about what it can do for local communities, industry, and citizens at large, really.
Absolutely, and an angel investor as well.
Yes, I've been doing that for about 5 years now. I have to say I really love it. It gets me to understand all sorts of things I didn't previously understand, wouldn't necessarily come across, like, for example, blockchain and those sorts of things, where you get to see these things early and also to meet some amazing people, and particularly women. I work with Angel Academe, who invest in primarily tech businesses, but all our businesses have at least one female founder. And it just gives me an amazing insight into how businesses are start up and run, and actually how resilient some of these people are. It's just astonishing, especially over the last year.
Absolutely, and we'll come on to that. But just before we do, I wanted to ask you, what kind of led you into tech and telecoms in the first place?
Well, like so many people, I kind of fell into it. I think I was a tea lady originally, and I used to literally push a tea trolley around, with buns and big urn of tea on it and those sorts of things. And I was looking for a new job, and I literally found an administration job at O2, and it was brilliant. I mean, back then it was still owned by BT largely, but I learned so much. People were so willing to share knowledge and information with me that I kind of fell in love with things like, multiplexing and actually how you build cell sites. And all those sorts of things. And the opportunities to ask people questions and to learn about that were endless. And I have found ever since, in all 30 years, there's not a day goes by that I don't learn something new, which is absolutely brilliant.
Absolutely. And now you're CEO of a startup and invested obviously in a number of them. How do you find working in and with startups?
Well, our startup's only been going for a short while, and we are going through a major investment round now. So that's really quite interesting, and I'm enjoying meeting lots of different investors, and also, understanding how difficult it actually has been for some of our entrepreneurs from Angel Academe to actually, get through things. So I have to say, a lot of the lessons I've learned from those people have been incredibly valuable to me about how you think about things, how you keep your workforce going, and how you manage, I suppose, to maintain stability through a period of instability. Our entrepreneurs at Angel Academe have just been, like I said, amazing over the last year. I cannot believe how resilient all the businesses have been, and how dug in they've been, so much so that some of them have actually managed some very successful fundraising and increases in valuation. We have a lot of purpose-driven businesses, and obviously they've really become very popular over the last year for good reasons, but it's all been accelerated as people look at the world around them. And I think if there's any group of people who are in a really great place to take advantage of the opportunities that are being offered over hopefully the next year or so, then it's that particular group of entrepreneurs.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and you've touched on COVID, which we can't really not acknowledge it just at the moment. But is there anything else that COVID has affected in your day-to-day, your work with as 5G sort of UK5G Advisory Board chair?
UK5G is about disseminating information. So it has 3 key objectives. One is about disseminating information and knowledge. One is about promoting 5G internationally, and the other one is to help develop the ecosystem by supporting the test beds and trials work the government has done. obviously, you know, COVID has been quite disruptive to that, as it has to all meetings and events. But a great part of sharing knowledge previously was, you know, pitching up on rolling our big UK5G sign. Actually, we now have UK5G hand sanitizer stations. And, you know, actually being at events and talking to people. We also run 8 working groups which cover a number of topics. And again, you know, a lot of the work they did was about reaching out to communities all over the country. So local enterprise partnerships, creative community, you know, all sorts to encourage, if you like, the adoption or thinking about how we can advance various elements of the economy and various industries using 5G. So a lot of that has moved online, and the team's done a great job of finding really good tools to do that. And in some ways, I think it's better. So in the way where, if, you know, I wanted to go to, let's say, talk to West Midlands 5G in Birmingham, or go to an event there, I'd have to get on the train, and, you know, there'd be 2-3 hours each way out of my day by the time, you know, you've got there and back to go to a meeting. You know, now I pop on a Zoom, and okay, I know we're all sick to death of, you know, looking at ourselves on a screen all day. But at the same time, it makes it that bit more accessible. And certainly for some of my colleagues with, let's say, childcare or parent care or other duties, you know, a lot of things that you wouldn't have been able to attend before, you can actually now attend. And we are getting, for the Create competition, which is the last competition that we ran for test beds and trials, the number of people who attended the events was very, very much larger than it previously was, because we would have done a roadshow around the country before. But again, it's just people being able to go to things is actually that little bit more flexible. So I think, you know, swings and roundabouts, and I can't imagine we'll go back to entirely physical events ever, because I find it quite exclusive.
Yeah, absolutely. No, definitely some silver linings there, you know, despite the kind of the very odd year that we've all had. As you know, International Women's Day is about helping to forge a gender equal world, celebrating women's achievements, and also challenging inequality. And I was just wondering, have you faced any obstacles due to being a woman in your career to date? And how have things changed sort of or evolved over your career?
So yeah, I've faced obstacles. I mean, a lot of them aren't overt, but, you know, they're very rarely overt, and it's not that often I've been in a deeply technical role. A lot of my background is IT architecture, where, you know, yeah, I have very, very, very frequently been the only woman in a room. But again, the overt obstacles, you know, apart from, you know, being in fairly intimidating spaces sometimes, have not always been that clear. And obviously lines move about what's acceptable behaviour and what isn't acceptable behaviour at a point in time. So I've seen a lot of things. I hope that the different experience I have in the industry now is as a result of the industry changing, not just the fact I'm older and more senior, and therefore, you know, and much better at saying, don't do that, I don't like it, than I used to be. On the other hand, you know, when I look at the industry, I don't feel like it's moved along very much at all. There are still very few women in it. If I look around, and particularly over the last year, on all the panels on, I don't know, 5G, fiber, whatever, largely it's a bunch of white guys sitting there talking to you. And I think the industry as a whole can do much better on diversity. I look at what, for example, the company doing HS2, whatever you think about HS2 is doing, they have a really strong diversity agenda in both terms of gender and ethnicity. And, you know, I think that's really important. So as we build Spring Fibre, I'm using data and you know, other proven methods to try and make sure we recruit in a much more blind way. And as we grow, we'll be using a platform. So obviously we'll go out and select when the time is right, but there's a platform called Applied, which is terrific and which really helps remove unconscious bias from a recruitment process by moving away from CVs, because CVs empirically are not a good way of selecting people. There is lots and lots of data to prove that. So I think there are things we can do to move things along further, but at the end of the day, there aren't women coming out with engineering degrees that I'm seeing in sufficient numbers, and then a certain amount drop out of the industry. If you look at civil engineering, so particularly in fibre, on most construction sites, in terms of active construction workers as opposed to people in peripheral roles, there's about 1% female participation in that, which is extraordinarily low. And this is part of the issue we have, because we don't have people working construction, they don't learn the extra skills, they don't get that bit further along and then develop the engineering skills, you know, to be fibre engineers or whatever it happens to be. So this is something we as an industry have to face into and tackle, because we know we have a massive skills shortage looming over the horizon. And part of the reason for that is because it's been exclusionary for so many years.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like, just on the International Women's Day theme, that you're choosing to challenge effectively the recruitment and diversity of all of the entities that you're working within.
Absolutely, yes. It's something where I will try and do better than I've done before, and hopefully make some progress.
Absolutely. And just as a final question, because I'm afraid we're running out of time, is there anything that you've watched or read or listened to recently that has inspired you and that you would recommend to others who are watching this?
So there are two things I'd recommend. So to people who are interested in structural inequality, I would say read Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez. It is fascinating. If it doesn't make you angry from time to time, I will be amazed. My poor husband has to read it for his homework at the moment because he's not enjoying, but I'm sure he'll get there in the end. And the other thing is actually the Guilty Feminist podcast. It's funny, it's refreshing, and particularly the early episodes, there was some about worth and about negotiating skills and those sorts of things, and how you pump yourself up for events. And while they're all incredibly funny, they are also actually full of valuable lessons. And I really like that reflective quality of them. So definitely worth listening to. I'm going to say the first 10 or 20 episodes of that. If you don't bother with any of the others, then it's still very worth doing.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed those, and they are very funny as well as shocking in parts. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, but thank you so much for joining us today.
That's a real pleasure. Nice to see you, Rebecca.